A scientist dragged her body through the Zaire jungles at the end of the 1970s. She has been trying to learn more about the extremely dangerous triffid plant. The woman is unable to escape their rage and dies in the jungle. However, she is able to warn her son and allow him to escape. In 2009, 30 years later, the triffids are being kept in labs far from cities in order to extract their oil, which is an alternative to fossil fuel and has stopped global warming. Because these plants are so dangerous, not only because they can feed on people, but also because they have venomous branches that can blind someone, oil companies are keeping the public in the dark about this. Every laboratory has extra security measures in place to ensure that no triffid is left unattended. When researchers need to get closer for research, they wear eye protection and are accompanied by a guard who uses tasers to keep the vines at bay. Bill, the woman's son and one of these many scientists, is one of them. He needs to complete his mom's work since he likewise accepts triffids are more intelligent than they look and the commotions they make are really correspondence, so he keeps a lot of accounts of them. In addition, he experiences recurring nightmares in which he sees strange images of natives from the jungle approaching him in a mask and has hazy memories of the night his mother died. They discover that an anti-triffid activist named Walter has snuck into the lab in order to tell the whole world the truth one afternoon while Bill is recording more under Lucy's protection. Bill comes closer to give Lucy his goggles after Walter knocks her out from behind and forces her to lose them. He also takes advantage of the opportunity to steal her taser and stun Walter, but the triffids notice his sudden movement and Bill gets venom in his eyes. As different watches at long last show up to capture Walter, Lucy gets Bill and hauls him to the neighborhood medical clinic, where the specialist gives him a neutralizing agent toxin in the wake of dressing Bill's eyes. He has a 50-50 chance of going blind, but they have to wait 24 hours to know for sure. In the meantime, people all over the world are preparing to observe a meteor shower. Joe interviews an astrophysicist for a radio interview who explains that the sun will release a massive explosion of gas and nuclear fire that won't harm humans but will look like fireworks in the sky. However, a few hours after the show finally begins, the solar eruption flashes so brightly that all technology loses signal and viewers feel a burning sensation in their eyes. Bill has no idea what's going on because he sleeps with his eyes bandaged all night. He wakes up a few hours later, goes to the bathroom, takes off the bandages, and finds that his eyes are fine. However, when he leaves his room, he also finds that everyone around him is in a panic. He eventually locates the doctor and learns what happened from him. The majority of people were blinded by the solar eruption. Fearing what might happen to the plants without supervision, Bill makes the quick decision to return to the labs and discovers that the city has collapsed into complete chaos. Walter puts his hood on to shield his face when he notices that the sky's lights are stronger than they should be in the triffid labs. Walter takes advantage of the fact that Lucy and everyone else in the lab lose their eyesight to get out of his cell and free the triffids. Torrance is sleeping through the meteor shower in a plane that is flying over the city. He is wearing an eye mask, so he doesn't wake up until he hears people panicking. Because the pilots can't see, the plane is going down, but Torrance ignores every scream for help and hides in the bathroom with a lot of life jackets. Torrance is the only person to survive the plane crash, and as soon as he does, he starts using the chaos in the city to rob stores. Jo, on the other hand, regains her eyesight after spending the night underground in a subway station that has since been destroyed by the plane crash. She meets a mother and her child outside, and when they realize she can see, they begin pleading for her assistance. Jo gets in a car and tries to drive away when soon a lot of people try to drag her away for their own safety. Unfortunately, the blind crowd blocks the street, allowing a police officer to approach Jo and attempt to arrest her using a weak justification. At that point, Bill appears searching for a power figure and notification what's happening, so he exploits the cop's visual impairment to take the weapon from him and salvage Jo. Then, at that point, both of them take off by maintaining calm and control for the visually impaired individuals not to see them. Jo and Bill finally reach Whitehall after a long walk, but the entrance is blocked by a group of blind people. They attempt to communicate with the guards through it, but they only respond with shots and cannot be reached. Bill decides to go to the labs by himself because he doesn't know anyone who can help him. Jo goes with him so he doesn't have to go by himself. To get to the lab, the pair steals a car, where they discover that Lucy and Walter are among the dead and that the triffids have escaped. Bill agrees to take Jo to her father's house so she can check on him. He retrieves all of his research because he thinks it might be useful later. Unfortunately, by the time they arrive, it is too late. The man is as of now dead and being removed by the Triffids. Joe denies it and tries to kill the plant, but this only makes the Triffid more enraged, so Bill drags Joe away before they are surrounded. Joe decides she wants to warn people because she has seen how dangerous these plants can be. As a result, the two of them return to London to use the BBC's emergency broadcast. Joe gives a quick interview to Bill to finally tell the world about the Triffids. She tells them that they'll be looking for food, so these plants will probably come to the cities, and that this is the last time they'll see them. After that, they stop for a bite to eat, and Bill tells Joe about growing up. Although his mother disagreed with his work, his father, Dr. Mason, was the one who discovered that genetically altering the Triffids could provide them with the answer to the energy crisis. She clearly kicked the bucket that day in the wilderness, however Bill hasn't seen his dad since. Meanwhile, Hilda, the Prime Minister's secretary who is now blind, is discovered when Torrance sneaks into the residence. Hilda plays the emergency broadcast for Torrance in the morning, confirming that no authorities are left after he spends the night there. Torrance drags Hilda along with him as he leaves because he wants to take advantage of this to gain power for himself. Later on, Bill observes flare signals emanating from various parts of the city. This must indicate that a group of people who are able to see each other has established a community and is letting others know where to find them. They come across Torrance on their way there, who is removing weapons from a military van that was attacked by a Triffid. Joe and Bill decline his offer to team up because he claims to be alone when Hilda is in the car. When they finally reach the building that set off the flares, they discover that blind people are not permitted inside. After being welcomed inside by some home office employees, Joe and Bill are informed that they have their own generator here. Despite Bill's warnings about the Triffids, the leaders of the community prefer to concentrate on gathering supplies and locating an escape route because the plants are easy to avoid if you can see them. As a result of the fact that the blind cannot be cared for, they have no intention of bringing them along, which Joe considers to be completely immoral and makes her want to avoid working with them. Bill wants to leave to find his father and figure out how to stop the Triffids, but he doesn't think Joe should go with him. Meanwhile, Major Coker is driving a gathering of located individuals to help the visually impaired that are being overlooked by Workspace. When Torrance discovers them, he joins the group as if he wants to assist as well and buys his way in by distributing all of the weapons he has gathered. Using tear gas and smoke grenades, Coker and his men enter the building through the parking lot without waiting. Bill and Joe are among those who lose their ability to see. Coker handcuffs every sighted person to a blind person for survival moments later, leaving Bill with an elderly mechanic and Joe with Hilda. Bill is of the opinion that Coker has the right motives, but he was foolish to disregard the threat posed by the Triffid simply because they were armed. The group is then taken to London to find supplies. When they stop for a break, Torrance tells Joe that Coker would love for her to start a new broadcast to gather support for their cause, but Joe turns him down because she doesn't like these methods. The first few houses they look at are empty. Following that, the group discovers a supermarket warehouse that has ample food for them to take with them. They can easily enter because the guards have already been killed. The Triffids were first there. Joe is grabbed by one of them, but Bill is able to save her by lighting the plant on fire with a lighter and a spray. Sadly, they continue to lose a few people in the other corridors, including Hilda, as the guard Torrance had assigned flees in a cowardly manner. When Torrance arrives, Coker demands more weapons to fight the Triffids and uses Bill as his right hand because he finally takes the Triffids seriously and frees the left. Evidently, Torrance does not like it, but for the time being, he is willing to cooperate. Joe realizes that Coker has changed his mind when they return to London, so she agrees to help with a broadcast before leaving with Bill to look for his father. Because Torrance doesn't want her to leave, he asks her to broadcast right away without planning. People from all over the city come to support them right away. Torrance sends his men to kidnap Bill and Coker and transport them to the forest so that it appears as though they were attacked by Triffids, while Torrance assumes leadership of the group while Joe is busy. After the transmission is finished, Torrance tells Joe that Bill kicked the bucket during an assault, giving her the things his men took from Bill's coat as evidence of his story. Torrance's men make noise in the forest to draw the Triffids' attention, but the plants get to them sooner than expected and kill everyone. Bill and Coker are able to escape while the Triffids are busy attacking the soldiers and take control of the truck. However, on their way out, Coker's eyes are sprayed with venom, and Bill loses his tape recorder when he uses it to distract the Triffids with his own noises. When the truck eventually runs out of gas, the two start walking in search of shelter. Joe continues to broadcast the next day in London to call people from all over the country. Torrance asks Joe out to dinner, saying that they still need a happy moment in the dark, but Joe declines. Later, Joe notices that a wall is being built around the area to keep the Triffids out. She starts to wonder why everyone is paying so much attention to Torrance's orders when this should be Coker's job. Joe approaches a young fighter named Troy to inquire about Bill's death because Coker hasn't been around in a while. Troy admits that they don't have any evidence other than the tape recorder that one of their men brought back from the forest. Joe sneaks into Torrance's office and steals the recorder so she can safely store it with the rest of Bill's belongings. Getting back to Bill and Coker, they find a church where a religious group takes them in and helps them heal. Mother Durant is in charge of this group, and she doesn't hesitate to accept any refugees and assures them that the building is safe from Triffids. Despite Durant's assurances that this is God's protection, Bill finds this suspicious because it does not fit the behavior of Triffids. While Bill leaves the church to continue his search for his father, Coker decides to remain a part of this community. He learns the truth about the so-called protection, however, as soon as he enters the forest behind the church. It turns out that Durant has been sending people, including nuns and priests, to keep the plants from attacking the church by providing them with food. Bill immediately returns and arrives just in time to prevent Durant from ejecting another girl under the pretext that she was selected to establish a new community elsewhere. When Bill tells the truth to everyone, the community gets rid of Durant and accepts Coker as their new leader. Now, Bill doesn't have to worry about them when he goes to his father's house. Joe pretends to be on his side when she tells Torrance in London that she does want to go to dinner with him. Joe makes one final broadcast in the late evening, warning people not to come because Torrance will want them to die for him. This occurs while Torrance is getting ready for the date. Clearly, Torrance is enraged by this and sends his men after her, but Joe is already running away with all of Bill's belongings in her pocket. Troy does notice that she is hiding, but rather than snooping, he lets her escape. Joe eventually finds a functioning vehicle and drives out of London in safety, despite the difficulty of running through the city and avoiding all the Triffids. She takes the car in that direction because she remembers the place Bill grew up in from when he told her his story, but she accidentally crashes and has to walk the rest of the way. At the point when she enters the backwoods, a truck appears in front of her, and regardless of how quick she runs, the driver comes after her and catches her. Meanwhile, Bill shows up at a town that has been deserted after a Triffid assault. He almost got shot by the only two people who survived, who turned out to be Susan and Imogen, two very young sisters. Imogen is desperate for the company of an adult, so she agrees to give Bill the family car if he agrees to take them with him. Susan is extremely wary of him. They come across another vehicle after driving for a while, and the driver turns out to be Bill's father, Dr. Mason. Dr. Mason doesn't hesitate to bring Bill and the girls to his house, which is fenced with electrocuted wires, even though the reunion isn't very pleasant. Because Joe had been discovered in the woods by Dr. Mason, Bill discovers her inside. The two of them finally kiss and spend the night together after Joe gives Bill all of his belongings back. Bill later visits his father at the lab, where he is already working on a new strategy. He believes that in order to stop the Triffids, they must develop a new variety that sterilizes rather than fertilizes. They will render all of the others infertile and eventually wipe out the race if they spread this new type of Triffid. Bill promises to find a male Triffid because Dr. Mason has been working on a female Triffid and needs the pollen from a male Triffid to complete the experiment. Imogen and Susan are practicing target shooting at the same time, and Susan becomes extremely enraged with Imogen because she already refers to Joe and Bill as mom and dad. Bill drives all the way to the labs after getting his weapons in order to see if there is at least one male Triffid in the area. He plays Triffid noises once more on his tape recorder, but Susan, who hid in the car and came along to watch him, is the first one to appear. Bill yells at her for having such a perilous idea, but then a male Triffid shows up and grabs Susan, making it difficult for Bill to hit it accurately without hitting the girl as well. He ultimately decides to attack the Triffid by jumping on it and hitting it until it dies. The Triffid head is brought back to the house by Susan and Bill, and Dr. Mason immediately gets to work on it while he talks about his wife's old ideas. Dr. Mason reveals that he still has some belongings that used to belong to his wife, including her own recordings and a creepy black mask that matches Bill's flashbacks after Bill goes through those horrible flashbacks again. That evening, Triffids all around the nation start sporing, consequently Torrance sends Troy to the lab to track down Bill's document to track down him and an answer for this issue. The following morning, a helicopter drops a number of brochures promoting a survivors' colony on the Isle of Wight above the house. The new family agrees to visit the colony once they finish the experiment. While feeding the Trifid, Dr. Mason makes the mistake of listening to his wife's old recordings in an attempt to solve the mystery. The plant attacks the doctor through the door hatch because the noises make it more violent. Bill rushes to the lab after hearing all the screams and turns off the tape before shooting the plant. Sadly, it is already too late. Dr. Mason has already been stung, and the venom causes his death. Bill realizes that he destroyed the mutated female and that there is not enough time for him to restart the experiment, so the family agrees to leave for the island in the morning after he gives Dr. Mason the proper farewell. However, things don't go according to plan when, as soon as the sun rises, Torrance arrives with his men and seizes the sisters, threatening to kill them if Bill doesn't come up with a plan to deal with the Trifids within 24 hours. Despite Bill's best efforts, the family is confined together, and escaping must be their top priority because there is no way out of the experiment. His plan is to use the recordings to entice the Trifids and then sneak out of the house while Torrance's men are attacked by the plants. Bill gives Susan the tape recorder to hide because he is called to see Torrance at that moment. Susan gets out of the window and plays the recorder outside, while Torrance cruelly mocks Bill for losing his parents. The Trifids arrive at the area at night, gaining easy access to the house because Torrance had disabled the wired fence. Torrance, enraged by this turn of events, sends Troy to kill the family as retaliation and goes outside with his men to begin shooting at the plants. However, Troy is unable to enter the room when he reaches it, so he shoots the air to fool Torrance into thinking the family is dead. Then, Troy takes out the person accountable for the house power switches, and when Torrance sees the plants are close enough for electric shock, he sends a request through the walkie-talkie, requesting the power vacillating to be turned on. The Trifids get to attack the men, while Troy pretends that the switchers don't work. Torrance runs back into the house after abandoning his followers and shooting Troy in the leg as he tries to flee with the family. Bill responds by tasing Torrance and knocking him out, but the Trifids have had time to surround the house and block all the exits due to the delay. Bill's flashbacks start when he hears about all the men dying, and he finally remembers why the mask is there. While wearing the mask, you can inject venom into your eyes, which won't hurt you, but will make the plants think you're one of them. Because they had done that to him as a child, he was able to escape while his mother was unable to. Bill walks the group through the process with a Trifid branch that broke during the fight. When they get outside, they see that it works. They are not threatened by any of the plants. Torrance awoke at that moment and tried to pursue them, but as soon as he emerged, the Trifids jumped on him and ate him, and Bill and the others fled. Later, Bill, Joe, Troy, and the sisters are on a boat heading to the island of survivors in the hope of finding enough resources to finish the experiment that will enable them to permanently destroy the Trifids.